You tuned in to the Soulful Conversations Podcast, featuring a panel of life coaches and spiritual leaders from around the world discussing how to handle some of life's greatest challenges. We will be sharing stories of courage, hope, and inspiration with you, our faithful listeners, to live your happiest and most fulfilling life full of purpose and passion for yourself, your families, and the world. We are here to be the change we wish to see. Let the conversation begin.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Soulful Conversations Podcast. Today, we are going to be talking about cognitive distortions. And I'm so excited to have this conversation because it is about how we see the world, the way we experience it. So I always like to start with a quote, and I found this one, and it's by Wayne Dyer. And he says, "Change the way you look at things, and the things you look at will change." And I think that's a beautiful way to start this conversation about the way we see the world, how we interpret what we see in the world, and how we can change the way we see it to make it more pleasurable, more peaceful, and more happy and fulfilling. So I want everybody to go around, introduce themselves, and then we'll list off the list that we have of cognitive distortions, and we'll talk a little bit about what that means, how that shows up in your life, and how we go about changing that. So Natashah, I'm going to start with you.
Hi, everyone. This is your girl, Natashah Khan. Hope everyone is good and doing well out there, and I hope you're ready to get some information that's going to hopefully change your life. That's all I got for now.
Nef.
Hi, everyone. Nefretiri McGriff here. Good to have you all tuning in again. And as always, we are having these soulful conversations, and I hope part of your soul is able to resonate with what we have to give you.
Thank you, Portia.
Hello, everybody. It's Portia Booker, better known as Portia, the producer, your host and face of Group Portia Talk Radio Show and Podcast. I'm excited to have this conversation. I mean, Dawn hit it off with, the way that we interpret things, the way that we view things in life. If we shift our perspective, I think adversity tends to cloud us in a sense when we go through a series of them. But I'm a firm believer that everything happens for a reason. So I'm really excited to have this conversation.
Thank you, Portia. Well, I have a list of 10 cognitive distortions, and cognitive distortions are how we're perceiving a situation or an event in our lives and seeing it maybe incorrectly. So one is all or nothing thinking. And that is, you look at things in absolute black and white. It's all or nothing. And the next one is overgeneralization. Your view of a negative event as a never-ending pattern or defeat. Third one is a mental filter. You dwell on the negatives and ignore the positives. Number 4 is discounting the positives. You insist that your accomplishments or positive qualities don't count. You focus on the negative ones. And jumping to conclusions is number 5. Mind reading, also they call it mind reading, is you assume that people are reacting negatively to you when there's no definite evidence for this. And they also call it fortune telling. You arbitrarily predict things will turn out badly. 6, magnification or minimization. You blow things way out of proportion or you shrink their importance inappropriately. 7, emotional reasoning. You reason from how you feel. I feel like an idiot, so I really must be one. Or I don't feel like doing this, so I'll put it off. That was emotional reasoning. Number 8, should statements. You criticize yourself or other people with shoulds or shouldn'ts, musts, oughts, have tos, or similar offenders. Labeling is number 9. You identify with your shortcomings. Instead of saying, I made a mistake, you tell yourself, I'm a jerk, I'm a fool, I'm stupid, I'm a loser. And 10, personalization and blame. You blame yourself for something you weren't entirely responsible for, or you blame other people and overlook ways that your own attitudes and behaviors might have contributed to the problem. So we want to, talk about each one of them, but Nef has a really beautiful one that I don't know about, so I can't wait to have her share that. So I'm going to go to Nef, and then we can start deconstructing these.
So there are tons of cognitive distortions, and one that I tend to work with my people with is the heavens reward fallacy. And that is the cognitive distortion that if I work hard enough, if I sacrifice enough, I will be rewarded for my hard work, my diligence, and all of that. And not to say that isn't true, because it is. Like, it's the cause and the effect. However, if you are spending time working on something, if one, we no longer have to be a sacrificial lamb. That's number one. We don't have to be a martyr. We don't have to take abuse or mistreatment, maltreatment for the greater good of the group or for the greater good of the relationship. So if I sacrifice, if I overdo, if I do all of these things, I will come out victorious and on top. Absolutely not. That is a cognitive distortion that keeps us in a place where we are overcompensating for something. However, if we are, let's just say there is, I'm just going to pull this out of the sky, marriage, and there's infidelity has happened. There's no trust anymore, but you continue to say, as the wife or as the husband, I am going to continue to do everything the right way. I'm going to ignore what's happening over here, and I'm going to continue to do everything the right way. Basically, you're loving them into submission. And then what you're telling yourself is, if I love them the right way, I will get a reward out of this. And the reward is they're going to love me back the same way. And then things will be okay. Things will be healthy again. And that's absolutely not true. It's not one of those things that good things will come your way if you do these things, because there is cause and effect. And we have to make sure that we are giving our energy to the right things. We're sacrificing for the right things. So that's the tip of the iceberg for heaven's reward fallacy.
Wow, I love that. It's like martyrdom, kind of. Yeah.
Absolutely. It's like I'm going to put on this armor. I'm going to put this S on my chest, and I am going to go to the edge of the world and back. I don't care if you didn't ask for it, because this is what I know to be good for you. It's almost like codependency a little bit. This is what I know to be good for you. And I'm going, again, love you into submission. I'm going to do all these things. I'm going to be this great role model. And then you have no choice but to respond appropriately. And then after all said and done, I win.
All right, well, I got to chime in. So I do think it has a lot to do with codependency. And as you guys know, I'm always going to get to the root of everything, right? No matter what we talk about here. Cognitive distortions develop as a result of things that we experience. And there's a breakdown in communication. There's this breakdown in understanding of what it is that we are seeing and the messages that we're receiving. And when we don't understand what we're receiving and or seeing, that is what leads to a child's interpretation of, I use the word truth very lightly because a lot of times what they're seeing isn't the truth, right? But they think that it is, and they will make a decision, or they'll have an opinion, they'll formulate an opinion on that decision, or on that situation or experience that they've had. So I want people to understand that are listening today, cognitive distortions develop as a result of that dysfunction. And codependency is very, very common. And I'm finding more and more that people tend to laugh about it, be like, yeah, I'm in a codependent relationship. Oh yeah, I know all too well about codependency, and almost sort of, wear it like a badge of armor, or they might just kind of sort of shrug it off like it's no big deal. And I want people to understand that codependency is an addiction. It's no different than drugs or alcohol. It is an unhealthy relationship. It is a toxic relationship. And so what Nef is talking about in codependency, they have something called triangulation, where you go through this series of being this martyr. From the martyr, you're the persecutor, and from the persecutor, you're the victim. And you get caught up into those three different roles during the, as you're in this relationship with this other person. So I do agree with you, Nef, with what you're saying. We see a lot of that and experience that from individuals that are in codependent relationships. We take the word sacrifice to a whole new level, right? I'm all for sacrificing. I'm a single mom. And so I know the meaning of sacrifice, but we take it to this extreme because in our minds, we're telling ourselves that the more I sacrifice me, the more I think less of me. I'm hopeful that there's something at the end of that. It's like something at the end of the rainbow. And in reality, what we're doing, I love, Nef said something about loving them into submission. You could try to love them into submission, but the only reason why you're trying to do that is because you're trying to feel better about you, right? It comes down to, I want to validate how I'm feeling. And in order to get that validation, that is the risk we're willing to take. And that's how far we're willing to sacrifice ourselves just for a little bit of love from somebody else. And it's sad because we have a whole world out there. There's a lot of people running around in this world that are living like that and have learned to normalize that. And all that does is perpetuate these cognitive distortions, Dawn, that you listed earlier. They just continue to get stronger and stronger. We begin to normalize that way of thinking. And that's what creates the mental dysfunction in our minds, which then translates in how we behave, which then leads to dysfunctional relationships. So.
Yeah, I see that a lot in the high school students that I see. A lot of them have this mindset: if I do exceptionally well in school, if I am this A student, if I'm on every single team, maybe the problems at home will go away. They internalize the issues at home or between parents, or the treatment from a certain parent. I did everything right. I get the students in my office all the time. I did everything right. I was a good child. I don't break the rules. I don't talk back. I clean my room. I keep everything, and they still don't love me. And I have to break down what that heaven's reward fallacy is for them and what it means. And then they start to put the pieces together, and they're like, okay, so I was always taught that if I do good in school, if I do this, then everything is perfect. And I'm like, well, having that mindset, now you are releasing people from their own journey to exercise free will, their own journey to learn what it is to be a healthy human. And so we're just now saying, okay, because I'm this, they're going to be this. And unfortunately, we can't take that responsibility from them. They have to, and we can't internalize their maltreatment of us and relate it to our success or our failure. And that's what typically happens.
Natashah, you have your hand raised.
Is it fair to say, Nef, with what you just shared with us, is it fair to say that what feeds into the all or nothing thinking? Because if I've been doing this for a while, and although I've tried my best, I've crossed every T, I've dotted every I, I've tried to be quote unquote that perfect child, and I still don't feel accepted, or like I feel like I belong, or I feel like I'm good enough. Can that feed into the thinking? I go from one extreme to the next, that I must not be good enough. I'll never be good enough, because it seems like nothing I do can ever be, satisfying to that person that I'm trying to please.
You're actually talking to one. That mindset or that distortion led into the all or nothing. And at a very early age, I was able to recognize that I am one extreme or the other. I have no balance. And so during my 20s, I was seeking balance. And I knew that was a blemish that I wanted to not necessarily make it go away, but just to nurture that blemish, because it fed into my anxiety. It fed into my limiting beliefs about myself. It fed into all of these negative things that I believed. And it's either I'm 100% in this, or I'm not doing it at all. And I missed out on a lot of opportunities because I felt like, okay, I'm not going to be good enough. So I know I can't give this my all. So I'm going to do nothing and sit idly by and wait for something else that feels comfortable or safe for me.
Yeah, I gotta add to that, Neff. I'm somebody who Dawn gets on me all the time about this all or nothing thought pattern. And even I'm a work in progress every single day. Like, I'm better at it now, but I can say that all or nothing thought pattern was ingrained in me from my mother, because I used to watch, for example, my mom has been in several unhealthy relationships throughout my upbringing. And so in my mind, if you're not in a relationship with somebody who you're fighting with every day, that's unhealthy. That's taboo. So in my mind, I'm like, oh, well, how can I really have a healthy relationship if we're not arguing over something, whether it's money, whether it's a job, whether it's your kids are supposed to come over or they're not? If we're not arguing, then what is it? So it's kind of, in my mind, a little bit of a fear-based thing for me, because I'm like, well, if it doesn't picture this, then what is it going to look like? And even when I think of my journey today, of me stepping into my true calling, right? When I embarked on my TV career, I was gung-ho about being this big time producer at NBC and working my way up this corporate ladder. So when my television career was crumbling, I'm like, oh my God, like, what am I going to do? I'm either this producer or I'm a failure. I couldn't see a middle ground in there until I really started to see. That's why I brought up about adversity, right? When I started to look at things from the perspective of everything is happening for a reason versus why is this happening to me type of thing. And even I still find myself falling into that boat, but I'm grateful to say now I'm able to recognize it. Like, oh, let me take a minute to step back and not go too deep into this all or nothing hamster wheel of shame. So I just had to add that really quick.
And that's really important that you added that, Portia, because, you know, when I look at the list of these distortions, there's a lot of overlap in many of them. But it does create our limiting beliefs when we believe these things about ourselves. Some of the ways that have, and just because we're aware of it doesn't mean we're perfect, right? We still might see things in certain ways. Like, you know, for example, you call somebody or you text them and they don't call you back. In your head, you're like, they hate me. They hate me. What did I do wrong? They don't like me anymore. Instead of, oh my gosh, you know what? They might just be super busy, right? Which is probably more the case. But in our minds, we start telling ourselves this story. What is that? Is that the mind reading or the jumping to conclusions, right? And I see there's an overlap in a lot of them, right? Mm-hmm. One of the things that has helped me is being a mom, you know, raising my girls, the labeling, you know, telling yourself, oh God, you're so stupid. You messed up again. You can't do anything right. And then when I started thinking, gosh, you would never speak this way to your children. You would never speak this way to a friend. Why do you talk to yourself that way? You know, so we just covered like several of them. Natashah, you wanted to chime in?
Well, I think with what each of you has shared so far, it comes back to that foundation of communication. Things are happening in and around us, right? And we're not talking about it. And things are not being explained to us. So we are making a decision based on what we're seeing. And when we see something, we don't have all the facts. You know, when we see a mom and dad fighting, I've used the example a lot of times with clients that I work with. You have a mom and dad that have been fighting in front of the kids. Or maybe they're fighting and we can only hear them, we can't see them, right? Mom and dad goes upstairs and they take that fight upstairs, closes the door. You don't even hear from them anymore. So kids are like, okay, well, we're not sure if mom and dad are done fighting or not. Next morning, we go and we sit down for breakfast and everybody's at the table and mom and dad are back to normal, right? No one's talked anything about it. We have no idea what the perception was of the child in that house at that time when they saw and or heard mom and dad fighting with each other or bickering. And it doesn't have to be, for anyone that's listening out there, when I say fighting, it doesn't have to be a knockdown, drag out fight, but just parents having a difference of opinion on whatever the subject matter might be. This child then can easily walk away with, well, okay, I guess when we fight, we just get up tomorrow morning and everything's going to be fine, right? As simple as that is. Well, I've seen mom and dad do it. They fight down here, they go upstairs, they close the door, and then they come out and they come out the other side and everything's better. The child does not know what transpired between when the fight started to when mom and dad sat down at the kitchen table, you know, the next time. There's so much lost in translation. There's so much that's not even discussed in that time. So it leaves the child to perceive whatever they want. They hold on to that. And then that now starts to translate in how they have relationships with their friends or how they might have a relationship with a partner, because that is learned behavior. And that's something that I wanted to add in here. So we need to consider that the communication needs to improve within the system. And we need to understand that our mindsets, the attitudes and behaviors are learned. It is not something that we are born with. And anything that we can learn, we can truly unlearn. Anything that we condition, we can recondition. So understanding that a lot of what we're talking about today, we don't have to be, some of us tend to say, well, that's my childhood. That's what I'm used to. That's all I know. You can change the way you think. You can change what you believe to be true, because at the end of the day, I always quote Don Miguel Ruiz from the Four Agreements. 98% to 100% of what you believe to be true is a lie. It doesn't belong to you. It's something that you perceived as a result of what you've experienced. And we really need to take more time in examining what we believe to be true. What is our truth, so that we can truly stand in that and really stand up and live our lives the way that we should be living them. So.
Yes. That reminded me, okay, so another one is overgeneralization, right? And it reminded me of a story when my daughter was getting her driver's license. She failed her first test, her driving test, right? And so when we went back to take her second test, I go, I know you're going to pass this time. Don't worry about it. She goes, I always fail. I'm like, Carrie, you only took it one other time, but she went in expecting herself to fail because she had failed once, and she passed. She did pass, but that was like the perfect example of just taking something that happened to you in your life and then like reflecting that to the rest, projecting that to the rest of your experiences. Portia, did you have something?
Oh yeah. I wanted to chime in on what Natashah just said, because I can tell you from growing up, when I used to see my mom and like her significant others, whether it was arguing or if it was some type of potential physical altercation, I remember thinking, oh my God, like, I'm not good enough. Like, will they stop fighting if I'm good? Will they stop fighting if I'm quiet? So when I even look at how that influenced who I am today, I find myself being very sometimes not vocal about what's uncomfortable, being silent instead of saying, hey, I don't like this. And it's, when I look at even back then, I'm still working through a lot of that stuff to this day to try to build a relationship. I mean, I've said it to all of you that I've manifested a significant other into my life now. So it's a unique journey of trying to unlearn that toxic behavior that was implanted in me, to just be open to going with the flow of learning this person's communication style, learning my own, being comfortable with sharing with them how I grew up and how I think, how I see things. And it takes a lot to do that. But I'm glad that I'm able to recognize where it stemmed from versus continuing to fall into that repetitive cycle of, why do I keep screwing up? Why can't I build relationships with people? Why can't I connect? Why do I feel so disconnected? I'm glad that I'm able to recognize it and improve on it, but it was a choice. I had to sit still and be like, you know what, Portia, we keep falling in this hamster wheel. Let's figure out the common denominator here. It's you, my dear, you're the common denominator. So what do we need to do right now to make us the common denominator in a good way instead of in a bad way? So I just wanted to add that really fast.
I think it's really good insight. And I think that that's what we as human beings need to do more of. I think we find ourselves, we get trapped sometimes, like you said, with that toxicity or that dysfunction. And then we want to blame the world, right? We want to point the finger outside of ourselves and somebody else made me mad, or it was because this person did this. And yeah, like at the end of the day, everybody has a role and everybody has a responsibility. But at the end of the day, it comes down to us. We have this power to choose. We can choose what we think. We can choose what we believe to be true. We could choose how we want to feel. And I don't think we recognize the power that we hold within ourselves. And so you're absolutely right, Portia. The ability to just be aware that, yes, these things have happened. Yes, this is where I learned it from, doesn't give me the permission and the excuse to continue with that same behavior. It's recognizing like I could do something with this and I could do something different with it so that I can continue to work on being the best version of me. So I like that. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. And I'll be honest, it took me a minute to really be honest with myself. Like, recently my father passed away and I was so used to telling everybody, oh yeah, Portia's fine. Portia's okay. And then it took my significant other to ask me, are you okay? And I said, no, Portia is not okay. And I really had to take a minute to be like, why have I been putting on this superwoman cape then I'm okay. But again, it goes back to my childhood, watching my mom be the superwoman in her life and not giving herself permission to be vulnerable, giving herself permission to grieve. And I took that on. And realistically, it started to do damage on my own, just not just my mental well-being, but also my physical, right? Because the panic attacks started again. And I'm like, hold up, Portia, we got to pump the brakes. We're falling into that hamster wheel again. So what are we going to do to change this, right? So that's why I tell people I'm still grateful. I'm so grateful for my grief journey of both my mother and my father making their transition, because it has really taught me a lot about myself and really giving myself permission to open up and be vulnerable and to change my outcome. And if I do have kids one day, to change their outcomes and not continue to fuel that toxic negative stuff that my parents ingrained in me.
So at the end of the day, I mean, all of what we talked about just now, it all comes down to how we're perceiving what is happening around us and what's going on in our thought processes about how we interpret what is happening around us. So, okay, I would like to talk about, like, what are some of the ways I mentioned, me telling myself, like, you wouldn't speak to somebody else this way, so don't speak to yourself that way. What are some other ways that you help people get through when they're having this thinking that is not accurate about how they're viewing the world? Neff, do you want to take that one?
One of the things I think is very important is to understand where our responsibility lies. Our responsibility lies with ourselves. We have the responsibility to inform, to receive information, to be the best version of ourselves, to strive, to heal. We have that responsibility, and it all focuses inward. We can't change what happened to us, and we're not responsible for what happened to us, because we did our job as children, which is absorb and learn through that. Our responsibility to ourselves and to those around us is ours and ours alone. I think the other piece is to not get so caught up on your responsibility for. So when we believe that we are responsible for someone else's response, their interpretation, their journey, their behavior towards us, because we can't change them, but we feel like we have this responsibility for that change, and we don't. And I think that's where many of us get caught up and stay in that codependent relationship. I am responsible for your healing. I am responsible for your success. And so it becomes like this control thing, when really the only person you're responsible for is yourself. So understanding the difference between responsibility to and responsibility for will be very tremendous in trying to get over mainly any cognitive distortion that we have, because it's all us. It's all you.
Portia, you and I have conversations all the time, and I always tell you, what is the famous thing that I say? Look at the 30,000 foot perspective. What does that mean to you? Because I really feel like that helps us interpret things in the best way possible for ourselves.
When I look at, I'll just use my own life. I mean, just looking at my grief journey, right? I had to take a step back and be like, you know what? It was my mom and my father's journey, right? I couldn't control them taking ownership of their health, right? It was their own journey. But like what Neff said, we tend to take on that responsibility because we want the success more than they do sometimes. And I have to remind myself that, no, this is their journey. I can support them, but at the end of the day, I'm only responsible for Portia's actions, not theirs. And so for me, the 30,000 foot perspective is, number one, being aware. Self-awareness is key, because we take on so many ideas throughout the day. I'm somebody who thinks all the time, and we tend to want the outcome more than they do. And I like lost my train of thought, but anyway, I'll go back to what I originally mentioned. But it's like for me with the 30,000 perspective, the way I go about my life with that right now is I take a step back and look at the big picture. Number one, what does my role have to do with this? Number one. Number two, what can I control in this situation? Number three, being aware of the situation itself and the emotions, right? Like Dawn, I shared with you my father's funeral, right? There was a lot of stuff that transitioned and transpired through that was placing an emotional toll on me. And I had to take a step back and be like, you know what? I'm aware that obviously there's some family issues here. Number one, my oldest sibling who I have, we have an estranged relationship because of the relationship my father had with both of our mothers. Our father married my mom. So in return, we're the other family, right? So I had to take into perspective his resentment, my oldest sibling, is valid. It's valid because, hey, how come our father stayed with y'all, but not me? Again, instead of me taking on that same negative energy and pushing it back out to him, I'm like, no, because I'm aware of it and I understand, I'm going to meet you with love. I'm going to still meet you with love. It's a little bit of a distance thing, but I'm going to meet you with love instead of putting that energy out that you're throwing at me. So that's where I think the 30,000 foot perspective comes in. It reminds me of my saying of be the exception. When you're the exception, the exceptional mile is never crowded. So being the exception means to not take on the worldly reaction, but taking on a higher level reaction and meeting it with love.
I love that, Portia. Natashah, what about you? What are some suggestions that you have to get out of, like, again, noticing our thoughts, right? That's the first step. But once you get to the first step, then how do you rewire your thought process to get to a better, healthier way of seeing things?
I think first and foremost is where's the evidence? Let's start with whatever that limiting belief is that you have. Where's your evidence for that? When you say that you're not good enough, you say that I don't belong, you say it's my fault or I never get anything right. Where's the evidence, right? I think we need to, again, get back to the root of it and look at where did that even come from, right? And after you find the evidence, I ask you to challenge the thought. Challenge your thought. You say, I never get things right, or I never pass, or, I always fail, or whatever that statement might be for you. I challenge you to really look at and ask yourself in your entire life, in your entire existence, you've never had one positive thing happen or one successful thing happen. And there isn't a person that I've ever encountered in my world that has not at least one positive thing. And if you can challenge your thought process, you'll be surprised how very quickly you can really turn that negative thinking into something positive. So
it's like fact versus feeling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because that's not that's not reality. That belief system is not based on 100% facts, right? Again, that's not 100%. There's no evidence to say that what you're saying to yourself is 100% factual. But if you don't have a conversation, or you don't investigate, you don't ask questions, you don't gain understanding and clarity from it, then you normalize that way of thinking. And like what Portia was just saying, you go through life and you just hold on to it and believe it to be true, when in reality, and that in itself shapes the decisions that we make. I look back on my own life with the thought of I don't belong and I'm not good enough. If I didn't believe that when I was younger, my life would be totally different than what it is. I would have taken much more bold choices. I would have stepped out differently in my life than the way that I did. You know what I mean? But I think Portia said it earlier, everything in life happens for purpose. And it's all an opportunity. And clearly I needed to take the path that I took. I have absolutely no regrets on it, because I've learned today, and what we're bringing to our audience today is knowing the power to choose, that all those things that came with me, like Nef said, while I'm not responsible for any of it, I am responsible to myself to decide what I want to do with that. Do I want to hold on to that? Or do I want to let that go? Or do I want to take that and make it better? At the end of the day, I get to decide. It gets to be my choice. And for me, that's very freeing and very liberating. And it has helped me through the years change my negative thought process into something more positive and optimistic.
I love that you both said that, because that's one of the ways that I get through things is being mindful of the fact that I got to who I am today because of all the experiences that I've had in my life. And have I made mistakes? 100%. Will I continue to make mistakes? Yes, I will, because I'm a human. But I think one of the ways that I help people is like telling them to give themselves some grace. Give yourself the same grace you would give to a cherished loved one, because you should be a cherished loved one to yourself. You don't have to do everything perfect. Manage your expectations and understand that, you're doing the best you can. And so I think that is one of the ways that has helped me. Like, when I mess up, I'm like, okay, you know what? I just learned something. I learned a way not to do this. And now I'm going to find a way to do this. So
well, I think you bring something really important, and maybe this can be a part of our topic for the next soulful conversation that we have. And it's all about expectations. So now you talk about this belief system that I've created for myself because of these experiences. And I go out into the world with a series of expectations. So many of us don't even realize that we are operating off of expectations for ourselves, expectations for other people. And when those expectations aren't met, how it's controlled. I think that's a great topic that we can continue on for another day. I see Nefretiri just like nodding her head, because that expectation that you talk about managing it. But I'm going to tell you, in my own personal experience, managing expectations are hard. I know Nefretiri knows this. It's you know that you need to manage your expectations, but man, they creep up on you, and before you know it, you didn't even realize you were carrying that expectation, right? But your behavior will clearly show you a lot of times when those expectations aren't managed. So I would definitely agree with you there.
It comes from society too, right? So it's not just us and our own personal life experience, right? Society and where we've grown up, our traditions, our families,
100%
shaped how we see these things. So that's where you come back to giving yourself some grace and saying, you know what? Maybe a lot of the stuff that I have believed to be the only way is not the only way.
100%. I agree. We need to do some more soul searching, right? When we had done our retreat and we talked about the art of love, I think it was key number 2. It was all about soul searching. We need to take some time and search our souls, and learn to love us again. It's great that we want to share love to the world, but like you just said, Dawn, we don't take the time to love us. I mean, we're so busy giving everybody else the next compliments or telling other people how amazing they are and oh man, you're so good at this and you're so good at that. But if we had to take the time and look in the mirror and say that to ourselves, we find that to be one of the most difficult things. Well, I'll speak for me, can be one of the most difficult things, right? But if we can do it for others, why can't we do it for ourselves? If we wouldn't speak ill to another child or we wouldn't speak ill of another person, then why would we speak ill of ourselves? And to me, it's pretty simple, but it's definitely a mindful practice daily, at least for me anyway.
And it is a practice, right? It is a practice. It doesn't happen overnight. There's not a switch that goes off and all of a sudden you're like, oh my gosh, I'm good at this now. It's like a ongoing thing.
Very true. Very true.
Yeah, definitely operating, like explaining to yourself, constantly reminding yourself, we're looking for practice, not perfection. I think that alleviates a lot of the pressure, because we have added so much pressure to ourselves. And like you said, Dawn, because of society and its ever-changing norm. And we have to contend with, okay, this is what I was taught. This is what I believe in my heart of hearts. This is, but I don't, and I think because we are human, or we're spiritual beings having a human experience, the human experience requires us to connect. And so if we feel like we're not connecting, sometimes that makes us believe we have to morph into something else. And so then we start to walk in our truth, what we believe, but we're not walking in the truth. But I'll save that for another time.
Before we close out, I gotta add to that, because I know my grief journey has really given me the open door to soul search, right? Because obviously I've lost several people in under a year. My mom, my father, one of my friends, and then our mutual connect, Gail, right? So when I think about my current grief journey, grief is love without direction, but I'm learning to redirect that love energy that I was putting to my mom being her caregiver, to my father, to Gail, to my friend, back to me. So I'm really learning to love me again. Like the other day, I reconnected with my inner teen and I'm like, man, what happened to her? Like, I missed her. I mean, she was misunderstood, literally, she was misunderstood. But I said, I missed that person who she was. She was bold. She danced to her own drumbeat. She did everything that she loved, which one of the things that I'm rekindling my passion for is writing. I mean, I'm currently working on 2 books at the same time right now. And I'm like, why did I let this person go? But again, society plays a role in that, because they're like, oh, you're not going to be successful doing that career. You're not going to be successful doing this. But I had to learn to say, you know what, society, you do your thing. I'm going to do mine. And I'm so grateful that I've reconnected with that part of myself. And it's a continuous journey that I love. So, well, that concludes another conversation right here on the Soulful Conversations podcast, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. And until next time, peace and hair grease, y'all.